Hey, what's going on, guys? Cookies here. We're going to go over how to heal the other side. We're going to be covering individual mob mechanics and stuff like that, and just what you want to be paying attention to as a healer going into this dungeon. So we have our first pack here, and the two mobs that I'm going to talk about are the Risen Cultist, which are right, you can see one right here on the stairs, and one right here, and also one right here. They're going to just spam cast Scribe on the tank or whoever they're aggroed to. This just does a moderate amount of damage. So interrupt it when you can, but otherwise just be aware that they do a little bit of damage to the tank by spam casting this ability. The next ability that they're going to cast is Dark Lotus, which you can see back here on this one by the stairs. And when this successfully casts, it is going to spawn this very strange swirl pattern of avoidable stuff on the ground that you need to stand out of. You couldn't really see it right there. We'll see if we get a better spawn here to look at. Let's just wait for another Dark Lotus cast. There's another one. This one's landing a little bit closer to us, so you can see it throws all these little purple things on the floor, and then after a short duration, they're going to turn into purple swirls, and then very shortly after that, they're going to all explode. And this pretty much is a mechanic that you just obviously need to stand out of. So be aware of it, because if multiple Dark Lotuses get cast at the same time, it can be really annoying because of the patterns. Like you can get really stuck in them. So just try to be mindful of where they're landing on the floor before they turn into swirlies. Try to pay attention to the little purple dots that they throw on the floor first, because that tells that you can then preemptively know where the swirls are going to spawn. Next up in this pack, we have the Risen Warlord. What the Risen Warlord does is he will just throw little visions of himself, like you can see over here in the corner, and you just have to avoid them. It's just indicated by a giant swirl right there on the Druid, and you just stay out of it. Cool. And then the Risen Warlord is going to occasionally cast Undying Rage, which he will change from being a small Warlord to a big one, and you will see here in a second, and he'll turn all red right here, Undying Rage. And what Undying Rage does is just make him do extra damage, and it is soothable. So if you have a soothe in your group, you can soothe it off of him. Or if you see the tank starting to kite, so like here, the tank is just tanking him and not caring about it, so we should be soothing him. Because usually the rule is if you're going to stand there and tank him, you want to soothe him so that he's doing less damage. But if you're going to kite him away, so if you see the tank running away during the rage, if you don't soothe it, the Warlord runs at reduced movement speed while in his rage. So you can just leave the rage active, and just that way it's easier to kite around without him just sprinting away from the mobs and stuff, because he'll run a lot faster than these mobs. So that's pretty much it for that pack. Next up, we have the Death Speaker. So the Death Speaker is in two packs in this dungeon, one of them being this one, and the Death Speaker is going to cast two spells. I'll rewind it just a little bit for when we get there. So the Death Speaker is going to cast Shadow Core, which is right here. It just does a heavy amount of damage to the tank, so this needs to be interrupted as much as possible. You can't stun or CC the Death Speaker in any way, so you only can use interrupts. So if you're a healer that doesn't have interrupts, be aware of this cast, and if you see it going off a lot and people aren't interrupting it, which is probably going to be the case in Pugs, this is these are the pulls where you're going to want to be using externals and damage reduction cooldowns and stuff like that on the tank to help keep them alive. And then the other ability that the Death Speaker casts is Erupting Darkness, which we'll see here in a second. Right here. And it's very hard to tell sometimes, especially with all the other purple stuff going on, like the Dark Lotuses. But essentially, it's an uninterruptible cast, and when it finishes, he's going to knock everybody back in whatever direction he's looking at, which right now he's looking up towards the stairs. You can see the kind of this purple vortex of stuff shooting out from him right here, and it starts getting more and more intense as the cast gets closer to finishing, and there it knocks back towards the stairs. I was standing in too close to the mob, so I also get knocked back, unfortunately. So that you also need to be aware of as a melee healer. If you're standing up close, just try not to stand too close to him, because you can get clipped by it. Cool. And then let's see. Let me go to the next pack, which will be the Enraged Spirit. So the Enraged Spirit is just going to alternate between two abilities, the Enraged Mask and the Rage. The Rage is what you need to be concerned about as a healer, but these Enraged Masks, what they'll do is they'll just spawn in random locations based on where people are standing, and then they'll do a cast that's uninterruptible, and then when it finishes, they detonate and blow up and do damage to everybody who's inside the red swirl around them. You can use crowd control and stuns and stuff like that to stop the mask from casting. It'll essentially interrupt them. So I guess they're not uninterruptible in that sense. So see you can see here that I dropped my capacitator totem over here by the urn, which is what we're using to stun the mask, and then that way all those masks that are spawning by the urn, they will get stunned and not damage the person who's opening the urn. And then we're going to wait until he does a rage cast, which as a healer, this is what you want to be mindful of, is planning a healing CD or damage reduction or something like that for every single rage cast, which typically you should expect 2 rages every spirit. Even if you have the urn, just expect that there's going to be a potential mistake made with it, and then the mask is going to cast 2 rages. So here's our first rage. And this is where I would want to plan a healing CD. I don't really have anything up here, so I just use it personal, and luckily it's tyrannical, so I don't need to worry too much about it. But on a fortified key, I would definitely have like Spirit Link or Ascendance and like alternate between those two. And then here comes the second rage, but we're gonna kill him in time, so it's not that big of a deal. But even then, like he only got 2 ticks of that cast off, and it still hurt pretty bad. So that's why you want to plan ahead and really have something ready for every single rage, and just expect that there's going to be more than one, just so that you're prepared for it, so that you're not thrown off and all that. All right. Next up, we have Ardenweald, so I'm going to skip pretty far ahead here as we encounter mobs that we already fought now. Okay, so we go into Ardenweald, and we have a couple mobs. So the first ones are these Weald Shimmermoths. They're scattered kind of throughout this whole area, and they will cast soporific shimmer dust. I don't know how to pronounce these words, but it will apply a curse debuff, you'll see here in a second, to random players, and they either need to jump to reset their stacks, or they need to be curse dispelled. And the way that the reason that you have to jump to reset the stacks is because you'll, like right here, the tank has it. I'm not tracking the stack count, but it just says that he has the debuff. Oh, you can actually see it right here on like the nameplate, which kind of helps. So you can see 4 stacks of this like Warlock class looking debuff. And what it does is when it reaches 10 stacks, it sleeps the player who has the debuff. So if you jump, it resets the stacks back down to 0. So that's your 2 options. So typically what I'll try to do is I'll wait until like ranged DPS get it. So like if the Warlock or the Druid get it, I would dispel them instantly. But if like the tank or melee DPS get it, I usually won't dispel them right away, because they can just jump without like really any impact to their gameplay, if that makes sense. So next up we have the Runestag Elderhorn, which the Runestag Elderhorn is this big like elk looking creature, and you can see what he is doing is spawning all these swirlies that are around the room. If you see these like starfall of swirlies that are spawning, I'll rewind it just a tiny bit. So right here you'll start seeing those like starfalls and these little blue swirls. That's what the Elderhorn does. On weeks like Raging or Bolstering, when the Elderhorn starts getting a lot of Bolstering stacks or is Raging, you want to be very careful of this, because it can be, like, right now it doesn't do that much damage, but with something like Raging, like a Raging affix on for the week, it can just, like, one-shot you if you get hit by one swirly. So just be aware of the swirls. Try not to get hit by them. But they're usually not too deadly unless you're at, like, a very, very high key level, so... next up we have the boss, because from here on out it's literally just repeat mobs or mobs that just do nothing but auto attack. So we will go all the way down to the boss. Okay, so Dealer Xy'exa. So the main mechanic of Dealer Xy'exa is the Arcane Lightning, which will put a debuff on a random player to start. We'll see who gets it first. Waiting for it. There it is. It's on the Paladin, and you can see that there's 2 separate debuffs. The first one is the debuff itself, which is going to jump from player to player. So when this expires, this left one, this like lightning bolt looking one, when that expires, it's going to jump to another player. This one on the right is a stacking debuff that does, it increases the damage taken from the debuff itself. And the whole trick behind it is, so now it's going to bounce to a player. So it's going to bounce to the closest player to whoever the paladin was next to, which is the tank. So now the tank has the debuff, and the paladin still has 4 stacks of this debuff, right? They aren't doing damage to him or anything like that. It's just increasing his damage taken from the lightning. But now you can see that the druid, the tank, is about to lose his debuff, and the paladin still has his stacks. So the reason for this is that you have to avoid passing back and forth between the same people. If you pass back to the person who just gave you the debuff, they're going to get increased stacks and take a lot of extra damage, and that's where the debuff starts becoming lethal. So you need to you essentially have to bounce the debuff to a new person every single time to avoid that happening. So I believe here no one has stepped in, so I'm pretty sure the paladin's just going to get it again, so you guys will see how it works. Yep, so the paladin gets it again, and you can see just how much more damage he's taking with each tick of the debuff. So it's, it's not like completely noticeable, but it will start getting out of control very, very quickly. Like if you look at how much damage I'm taking in comparison, if you take out the fall damage, and then here I'm going to pass it to the warlock. So now the warlock has stacks. And now because I've passed the warlock, the paladin has reset his stacks. So I'm going to step away from the warlock so that he can pass to a different player. And there he passes to the druid. And the whole intention of this is, as a healer, you just want to be healing whoever has these debuff stacks, and especially whoever is going to get the debuff. They're going to take a large initial amount of damage, and then they're going to keep taking damage until they pass the debuff to somebody else. So it's just all about whack-a-mole healing and keeping people topped up, especially if they have the debuff or are about to pass it. Or about to be passed to, I should say. Okay, so the other mechanics in this fight is localize explosive contravance, which is just, I'll call it the bomb. So the bomb should pop up here in a second. And there it is, it's on me. So what the bomb does is it just targets a random player, and then by the time that the timer expires on the bomb, you need to take a portal up into the air, because you need to be on a different, I guess like a z-axis compared to everybody else. So there I go up in the air, and then the bomb will explode and do damage to you. So if I rewind it, I rewound it way too much, but that's okay. But basically, the person with the bomb is going to take a lot of damage, so if they have debuff stacks, or if they have the debuff and also get the bomb, or the worst case is if they get the bomb and then someone passes them the debuff, it is extremely, extremely lethal. So just be aware of whoever gets the bomb and keep them very, very healthy while they have it. And that's where this becomes like a difficult game of whack-a-mole, because you have a lot of different plates to spin as a healer and people to keep alive. So there, like, you can see I got the debuff right here. I got the bomb, and I already have debuff stacks, and I have the lightning on myself right now, so I'm taking damage from the lightning, still taking damage from the lightning. Now I passed it, now I have the bomb, so I have to heal myself up to full, detonate the bomb, and then start healing the warlock because it passed the debuff to him. So it's just like a lot of paying attention to where the debuffs are going and who they're on. And then the last ability that the boss is going to do is just Explosive Contravance, which is this cast that she's going to do. And this is the AoE cast, so everybody, by the time that this explosion or this cast finishes, we need to all be up in the air away from the boss. And then I will mention one thing about the bomb right here, is you can just jump with it if you stand on any of the parts of ground that are raised. So like this part that I'm standing on right now, this like darker shade or this darker patch on the floor, as long as you're standing on one of these, if you jump at the very end, like just regular spacebar jump at the very, very end of the bomb, it'll count you as being on a different z-axis as everybody else. But just, try it out, but don't like completely rely on it. That's why sometimes I just take the portal anyways if I'm not feeling too confident about it. So that's that whole boss fight. Is just a lot of whack-a-mole healing and paying attention to what's going on and who has what debuffs. and managing the debuffs correctly. And usually as a healer in a pug group, you're going to be the person who has to manage the debuff also, because people will kind of just pass it back and forth in pugs a lot of the time. So if you need to, like if you see the tank get it, like at the beginning of the fight there, what I should have done is when the Ret Paladin had it and passed it to the tank, and then now the tank and the Paladin are just still in melee together, I should have ran in and taken it from the tank here. So I should have ran into melee, taken it out, and then I could have passed it to other people. So that's probably a responsibility that you're going to just have to take up as a healer, is managing the bomb pretty much by yourself, or the debuff, I should say, by yourself. Cool. So that is Dealer Xy'exa. Next up we have the Mechagon Wing. So we're going to skip this drill, but I'll just talk about it briefly. All the drill does is... Where is it? All the drill here does is a AoE cast called... what is it? Haywire. And all you need to do is just LOS it when it happens. So if you're fighting the drill, just LOS around a corner when it starts casting Haywire. And if other people are going to be tanking it or something or not avoiding it, then just be aware of healing them. Other than that, it doesn't really do anything specific for healers. Okay, so we have this dog pack. Before I explain the mechanics, the best advice I can give for fighting this pack is just keep all the melee DPS and the tank topped up as much as possible. Range will not have a problem at all with this part unless they're in melee, but the people who are close up and in melee with these mobs are gonna probably be taking a lot of like unintentional damage, because there's just a lot of like cleave and weird abilities that target people who are closest to the mobs, and sometimes the tank isn't the closest, so people can just take random spikes of damage a lot of the time. Okay, so you have the Arf, which is the dog robot. It is going to cast Woof, which is going to target a random player. Right here, it's this blue circle you can see that ran out of my screen, and then it will just do a little tiny bit of damage and stun the player. So if you have it, just don't stand around other players, just kind of tuck yourself in a corner. That's why I'm sitting right back here in the corner, is so that I'm away from other people already to begin with, so if I get targeted, I hardly have to move. And then the only other ability he does is Metallic Jaws, which just does a moderate amount of damage to the tank. It's just like a tank hit. And then you have these Headless Clients. They're going to do Spinning Up, which you can see them casting right here. It's just a channel that they do, and they start essentially blade storming and just hitting everybody who's close to them. So typically you want to use stuns and crowd controls and stuff to stop them from spinning up, because the spinning up is what's going to kind of randomly kill a lot of people. And then also the other dangerous ability is Discharge, which you can see right there at cast. Typically Discharge targets whoever is closest. So here the tank was barely closer than I was, but if I was standing just a little bit closer, it would have targeted me. And that's where melee DPS can just take a ton of random damage for no reason. It's just if they're too close to these clients, when they get knocked back and stuff, because when they do the spinning up, they kind of just get out of control and kind of go all over the place. And then those discharges can just hit people for all their HP, especially if they get targeted by multiple casts of it. So that's all you need to know about them. These Lubricators, we're in a very awkward spot here, but you can... all I'm going to mention is that the Lubricate cast, if you're a ranged DPS or healer, you can actually stand far away at your max casting range and avoid the Lubricates altogether. They just won't hit you because you'll just be outranging them, so just be aware of that. Otherwise, just interrupt and AoE heal if the Lubricates go off, because they do a moderate amount of AoE damage to everybody in the group. And then we have the Sentient Oils here. These are a big pain pull for a lot of fortified weeks. So what you're going to want to do is plan a healing cooldown or two for here. Honestly, you can pretty much just send everything you have available during this pull. I believe I throw SLT pretty early on, and then we go Ascendance and stuff like that. But besides just healing a lot, because essentially they're just going to cast Essential Oil on random targets, and it just does a pretty hefty amount of damage. This is a tyrannical week, and you can see people's HP just kind of chunking. So again, it's a game of whack-a-mole healing for this, and there I'm literally going to 10% HP just because I happen to get targeted 4 times in a row. So it's something you want to be very cautious of. And then you can also crowd control these on top of that to help further how long they're interrupted and can't cast for and stuff, and like beam, as you can see, is really, really useful. So just be aware of these. These are a big healer roadblock, so make sure you're planning accordingly for these. You want to have some kind of cooldown ready, which there shouldn't be any reason that you use a healing cooldown in Mechagon until this point, and you don't really need a cooldown on pull for the boss, so you just can freely send everything, and then your cooldowns will come back up as you need them. So now we'll go ahead and talk about the boss here, which is Millhouse Manastorm and Maleficent Manastorm. So the way I'm going to break this fight down for healers is just during Millhouse Manastorm, you are just going to focus on AoE and group healing, because that's what's going to be happening, is a lot of like AoE and group damage going out. Everyone's going to be taking a decent amount of damage, and that is mainly from the summoned power crystals that people are going to be soaking, and the Diabolical Doom at the end of the phase is going to do a burst of AoE damage to everybody. And then when we have Maleficent come down, which Maleficent comes down after a certain amount of time, here's Maleficent. During Maleficent, it's going to be the exact opposite. You're going to focus on single target and tank healing. So it's primarily going to be the tank taking the most amount of damage. And then the only other time people take damage is from the Shadow Fury cast, which Millhouse does on random players. You'll see it here in a second. So it will target, let's see who gets targeted by it first. It should be here shortly. There, it's on the Warlock. You can see he has like a little arrow above his head, and he has this purple circle spawning around him. He's going to hit the boss with it, and then also take a burst of damage himself. He didn't really take too much. I think he had like an absorb shield preemptively, but on a decent key level, like people are going to take like half their health and damage and stuff from that, so it can be a little bit scary. And then the only time you AoE heal or use, where I would recommend using healing cooldowns, is right here on Maleficent when she runs away. You'll see here in a second she will run. It should be coming up. I guess I'll just wait for it to happen. So she should do it right here. Yep, Aerial Rocket Chicken Barrage is the cast. And then someone's going to get the debuff again, has to put it on top of her, and then when this cast finishes, she's going to do a bunch of AoE damage to everybody, which includes the player who also has the Shadow Fury. So the person with Shadow Fury is going to take a ton of damage. So you can see here it's the Paladin. So he's going to take damage from the Rocket Barrage, and now he's getting stunned, and then he goes lower, and you can see how much more damage he took compared to everybody else. So that's why you focus a lot of healing and use like externals on the person who has that, because he didn't use anything here, and if this was a 23 key, he was dead. So like you want to have some kind of damage reduction on that person if you can. So use externals on that person who gets targeted by the Shadow Fury during the Aerial Rocket Chicken Barrage. Other than that, it just does some AoE damage to the group. And then again, like I said, Millhouse is AoE and group healing, and Maleficent is single target and tank healing. So hopefully that is helpful. Next up we have the Hakkar wing. So we'll talk about the Atal'ai High Priest. They will just cast Shadow Word Pain on random players. It's just going to be a little magic debuff that you can dispel. You can see right there. It really doesn't do too much damage, so you don't have to dispel it. But if there's nothing else to dispel at the moment, you can feel free to dispel it just to reduce the amount of damage that the group is taking. You can see me kind of ticking down here with it, so it can still be beneficial to dispel it, especially on like Fortified Week, but it's not like absolutely you have to dispel it or anything like that. It doesn't do that much damage to be warranted to be that dangerous. And then we have the Atal'ai Deathwalkers, which I'm actually just going to fast forward a little bit because this bull is really big. There we go. We have less mobs to deal with. So the Deathwalkers are going to apply this bleed that you can see on the tank. It just went away, but we'll probably see it pop up again. There it is, 2 stacks of the bleed. And that bleed hits pretty hard, so you need to, whenever the tank is taking these Deathwalkers, just keep the tank nice and healthy. And then they cast Blade Storm, which you can see right there, and you just want to interrupt it with some kind of stun or crowd control to stop them from either casting it in the first place or just once they start channeling, so that melee DPS can actually do damage, because otherwise they're just Blade Storming around and melee can't really get in very close during the Blade Storms. What else do we have? We have, outside of that, I would say that the Hoodoo Hexers also hit very hard with their melee attacks, so be aware of that. And they cast Hex, which needs to be dispelled. If it goes on a player, it will just polymorph them and make them unable to cast anything, so you need to dispel them. It's just a regular magic dispel. And then they also cast Lightning Discharge, which will target a random player, and the player just needs to get out of the group and not be near other people. Otherwise, the damage will like bounce like a chain lightning. It's this circle right here. So that person will take initial damage, and then anyone inside the circle it'll bounce to and bounce to other people, and then it just becomes really, really bad very fast. Okay. And then I think that's pretty much it for this hallway, really, as far as who does damage and stuff like that in the hallway. So next we're going to talk about Hakkar. So for Hakkar, this is another pretty hard healer fight on Tyrannical Weeks for a lot of people. So the first ability that we'll talk about is just as he does the abilities, I guess. So it looks like the first ability that he's going to do is the Corrupted Blood? Yeah, so here's the Corrupted Blood. It's going to apply a debuff to 2 players. They have this circle around them, and they're going to take constant ticking damage from this debuff. It's a decent amount of damage, so you need to keep the 2 players with this debuff topped up. And then if any other players are inside of the circle when the damage happens, like each tick of damage, they will also get a new refresh of the debuff. So it spreads to other people, so you want to stay clear of other players. And if it starts spreading, then that's just, you just know that you need to heal more and more players as players get it. But you can see me taking a decent amount of damage from it here. And then the next ability that the boss does is Piercing Barb, which you probably just saw right there on the tank. It does a heavy amount of tank damage, so you want to keep the tank nice and healthy. You can see here, like, even though I'm taking damage from this debuff, it's about to expire, and I'm not taking any more damage after it expires. So it's important for me to get the tank topped up, so that's why I focus healing into the tank rather than myself here, because he's about to take a Piercing Barb, which is right here, and it does a moderate amount of his health and damage, so keeping the tank nice and healthy for each of those Piercing Barbs is very important. And then the last ability that the boss is going to do is what you just saw right there. I'll just actually fast forward this one for when he does it again. So whenever the boss reaches 100 energy, which you can see right here, it just goes up periodically throughout the fight. He is going to cast Blood Barrier, which should happen here in a moment. After he casts his other abilities, should be happening soon. Relatively soon. There's the Blood Barrier. So what this does is the boss is going to do damage to everybody, including his Sons of Hakkar, these little minions. And the more damage that this ability does to everybody, including his own units, it will apply an Absorb Shield on him based on how much damage it did. So this is where damage reduction cooldowns or just defensives in general are really, really big, because if you can reduce the amount of damage you take from the Blood Barrier, that's less of a shield that you have to now bite through in order to continue the fight. So you can see here, we take some damage, and the boss gains a little Absorb Shield. You can see it on his health bar. You can see it down here on his unit frame. And this is also going to do a heavy amount of AoE damage to everybody in the group, so you want to keep the whole group topped up for when the Blood Barrier is about to happen. So when the boss is getting close to 100 energy, you want to really start focusing healing into everyone, especially if there's ads alive and stuff, because for every ad that's up, so if I just kind of fast forward it randomly here, for every ad that's alive, you're going to be taking a lot of extra damage. And like, you might think the Blood Barrier kills the ads, so that's a good thing. Like here we have almost 4 ads alive, and they're just going to spam cast Blood Nova, and it does a lot of damage. So this is where you would use healing CDs. You want to use healing CDs whenever you start seeing a lot of ads popping up at the same time. If you have like 2 or more ads active and the boss is like more than 50 energy, you need to start using some kind of healing cooldown to catch back up or to keep caught up, so that when the Blood Barrier happens, you don't just die. Because like right here, he's going to do a Blood Barrier, and it's almost going to kill all of us because... But here I keep us caught up enough because I had Ascendance rolling. So we don't, like, all of us took over half of our health in damage, and we're still taking damage after that. So that's the most deadly overlap, is 2 or more ads and the boss is above 50 energy. Because if the boss is above 50 energy, that means by the time that you get caught up on healing or keep using a healing CD, he's probably going to do a Blood Barrier by then. So, and you want to have everybody full health for that Blood Barrier. So that's that whole fight. Next up we have Mueh'zala. So Mueh'zala is going to, let's see, kind of waiting until we pull it. Here we go. So the first ability that Mueh'zala is going to do is Soul Crush, which he should do right off the bat here. We'll talk about this other ability in just a second. There's the Soul Crush. I looked away just as he did it, but you can see it right here, Soul Crusher. It just hits the tank for a heavy amount of damage, so you want to keep the tank nice and healthy for every Soul Crusher. And then the other ability that the boss is going to do that you just saw is the Cosmic Artifice, and it's going to apply a magic dispellable debuff to everybody in the group. You do not want to dispel this debuff. You want to let it stay on everybody, because if you dispel it, I'll explain in a second why it's bad. But after they expire, it's going to drop these little purple orbs on the floor, and they're going to turn into stuff that you have to dodge later, these like giant circles. So typically the strategy with that is you want the ranged DPS and healer to stack up together in a group somewhere, and you want the melee DPS to stack up somewhere with the tank, because that way you keep all the orbs condensed as much as possible rather than spreading them out all over the place, so that they're easier to dodge and navigate while you're doing this dance here, which is the Master of Death. I'll rewind it just a tiny bit for the Master of Death. So the Master of Death cast is going to, he's either going to do a melee slam, or he's going to cover the entire left side of the platform with avoidable stuff, or the right side of the platform with avoidable stuff. So here you can see it's right there. So we have to stay on this side of the room, and now he's going to do the other side, and he never does the same ability twice. So he'll always alternate between all three and then be done. And now he's going to do the melee slam. So that's the melee slam. You got to get out of melee. And now we're going back in. And then always after that that Master of Death dance that you do, he's always going to Soul Crush the tank right away. So try to have something ready for the tank if it's you have an external, or just be ready to instantly heal the tank. Because like right there, we get out of the Master of Death and the tank just instantly goes to like half HP. So it can kind of throw people off, especially if the tank took damage from something else before that. Like if you got hit by one of the Master of Deaths, then he's going to be in big trouble. And then the last ability that the boss does is Shatter Reality. Other than this, he literally just repeats what we're watching here. And then, so let's go a little bit forward. It'll be after this Master of Death. So there you can see the Boomkin got hit by his. You res him, and now Shatter Reality, and then we all go to these separate portals that are along the room. There's 4 portals total, so you need to split up your group. Each of the DPS should go by themselves, and then the tank and the healer should go together typically. There also is other strategies to it, but I'm not going to explain those, so we're just going to go over this fight like this. So this ad will spawn, you come over here, and during this phase, you pretty much do no healing whatsoever, you just kill this ad. Killing this ad before the timer runs out, which you'll see the timer here in a second. It'll be right about, should be popping up soon, right here. Cast Coalescing, if you have like bigwigs, it'll show up. And what this does is bring you all back to the boss. So you want to kill the ad and click on the totem right here that you see, this purple totem. You want to click on that and kill the ad before this timer runs out. Because if you don't do it before the timer runs out, the ad just fully heals itself, and you have to do this phase again and kill the ad again. But if you kill all the totems and all the ads, as you can see here, I don't know if we actually kill all of them. I don't think we do. Maybe we did. Let's see. So for each ad you killed, one of these like images of Bwomsamdi are going to spawn and do like 25% of the boss's health and damage, or I would say like 20%, I guess. So let's see if we get the last one. Yeah, we did. Okay. So that means we got all 4 totems. So now we just have 6% of the boss's health to go through because he dies at 10.5%. So now we just sit here and repeat that exact first phase that I already explained when we started the fight. He literally is just going to do the Cosmic Artifice, the Master of Death, the Soul Crushers, and then just rinse and repeat. He's going to do it all again. And that is that's pretty much it. That's the whole fight. So as far as healing goes, you do a little bit of AoE healing during the Cosmic Artifice, the Artifice, because it does do damage to everybody in the group. But really the name of the game is just keeping the tank topped up for every Soul Crush, because that's what's going to be something that wipes you. Like other than that, most of the stuff in here is something that's out of your control if people die to. Like if they die to the Master of Death and stuff, unless you're on a low enough key where it doesn't one-shot them, then yeah, I mean, it's just, again, all about keeping everybody topped up to allow for those mistakes. But you can see there when like the Cosmic Artifices blew up, we all took like a decent amount of damage. So keep the tank topped up first priority, and then outside of that, you just AoE heal. So that's the other side. So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was the last upload for the entire series. I will actually be adding Tazavesh once it comes out and once I actually get some time in there to play. I didn't play much of it on the PTR. I think next time we have this situation where we have like a new dungeon coming out, I'll play it a lot on the PTR so I can make a video about it before it actually releases on live. But I want to make sure that I'm confident in there and that I understand the dungeon really well before I explain it, just like I did with these dungeons. So expect that video soon. I'm going to try to just spam it, spam Tazavesh like the whole first week of the new patch and stuff, and then get a video out as soon as I can. But again, I want to make sure that I understand the dungeon. I'm not just like throwing info out there that might not be accurate or needs to be updated. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good one. I hope you're enjoying 9.2. See you later.